Hello, companions. Hello, brothers. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to talk for you this evening. It's an honor to be here. Today, I have to start by admitting that in booking this talk, you have volunteered yourself to take part in an investigation, an ongoing investigation of which you are now part of the team. Now, everyone here is used to investigation, or you wouldn't be learning about the degrees you are or a member of this august society. So let's start our adventure into one of the central mysteries of the Royal Arch degree, treading where others have before, but looking to see if we can find a few more clues and work a few things out. Now, I said I'd introduce myself. So let me start first and foremost by explaining why I'm talking about this. My name is Martin Faulks, as you can tell from the accent. I am English and I live in Cambridgeshire. And my expertise, my focus in life is on the skills of the mind, whether it be meditation or hypnosis or autosuggestion or memory techniques, anything like that gets me really interested. I'm interested in the full potential of a person. How can we unlock that? Indeed, my focus for the last 5 years has very much been on the art of memory, not the modern art of memory, though I'm excited by that, anything that works, but very much the original art of memory and its latter expressions through the Renaissance. So as you listen to this talk, as you join me in this investigation, it's good to know that my qualifications lie in memory as a practice, not as an intellectual study. If you have a look at my YouTube channel, you'll see me memorizing a whole magazine or a deck of cards, or entering a room full of crowded people, learning their names, and then going back later on and showing that I can still recall who everyone is. There's nothing that I'm going to describe this evening or talk about I haven't tried. Indeed, those who know some of these different philosophers and so on will have great sympathy for my fiancée, Kindra, or Kitty to some of you already know her, who had to endure 6 months of Raymond Lull, or a year and 3 months of Giordano Bruno's techniques before I'd got them down. If you haven't heard of these names, don't worry, though these fine gentlemen will be coming to meet you soon. Now, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and you don't want me to talk too long, so I'm going to share a slideshow with you. So the slideshow should be showing. Make sure you can see it, but also make sure that your mic is on mute. It's easy to unmute yourself, and it's just fate, isn't it? You unmute yourself, and that's the time where the dog barks or someone's at the door, or a conversation that you'd rather others didn't hear appears. So please make sure, because I can hear a little bit of feedback. I think it's probably someone's just joined and after the initial muting. So the talk this evening is called Remembering the Royal Secret. And as you can see from the symbol there, we're looking at the Royal Arch degree. Now, as we start to go through our investigation, remember that, of course, the Royal Arch degrees that I have seen may be quite varied. I work for the publishing company, Lewis Masonic, the world's oldest Masonic publishing company. So I've toured the world quite a bit. but there's so much variation there that you may find that some of the things I mentioned don't exist in your chapter, or some things that I'm looking into, you've got the final piece of the clue. So stay tuned and keep aware. So our mystery starts with this wonderful, talented woman, Dame Frances Yates. Some people will be aware of her groundbreaking works on the art of memory or on Giordano Bruno. She was a resident expert at the Warburg Institute, and she really did a lot to learn about the techniques used to improve the memory and develop the mind during the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. When I read Frances Yates, I find myself thrilled at the level of discipline she had with her academic work. She really managed to understand people and express what she was trying to say with a great degree of referencing and evidence. Now, below the writing about her, you can see a diagram. This is from Robert Flood. This is a diagram demonstrating the art of memory. Robert Flood, we won't talk about him too much today. He was a Rosicrucian, a very mystical character, and he wrote quite a bit on the art of memory. And last year, for the first time ever, I had his work translated into English. Do have a look at the Lewis Masonic website or my personal website if you're interested in this. As you can see, they're using the oculus imaginatorius. This is the eye of the imagination. And sometimes you'll see this phrase slightly differently, but this is the third eye where you can visualize. It was believed you had different compartments in your mind, different chambers at the time, and that the art of memory worked with those natural processing devices. It's something that if you've seen some of my more in-depth talks just on the art of memory, you'll already have heard about. If not, do have a look. But you can see those drawn actually on this man's head. So Frances Yates was studying these memory methods used in the time just preceding or during the formation of the first Grand Lodge. And she found herself starting to wonder if there was a link between Freemasonry and this memory art. As time went on, she became increasingly convinced that this memory art, the art of memory, and Freemasonry were indeed one and the same thing, just that Freemasonry kept some of the techniques from before. One day, when looking through some ancient Masonic documents, she lost her breath. She'd found something. Her assistants round her found themselves holding their breath because she was so amazed. She'd seen something within the symbols of Freemasonry that made her absolutely convinced that the certain degree she was researching wasn't just a form of memory art, but was connected with a very mystical, magical branch. She'd found a memory wheel in Masonic symbolism and in documents. We'll look at these memory wheels in a few moments, and you can tell me if you can think where she saw such a thing. But before we do that, there's a few other things you need to know. The link between Freemasonry and the art of memory goes back a long way. Before you, you can see a man with a great beard. I think some of you here could almost match that beard, but you can see from the writing below that he's not a modern mason, but an ancient stonemason from Scotland. You're probably aware that a lot of the traditions of Freemasonry come from Scotland. Indeed, there are some lodges that we know have transferred from stonemason lodges to speculative. William Shaw was a member of the Royal Court of Scotland. James VI of Scotland, who was his king, who was later going to become the James I of England as well, who was going to unify the royal families. He was given a job, a really important job, of making sure the masons, the stonemasons of Scotland, behaved. And of course, what do you do when you're given such a job? You draw up a book of constitutions. This first book of constitutions is known as the Shaw Statutes. And we're looking at the second edition of the Shaw Statutes. If you want to know more about this lovely history and which lodges still have copies of the Shaw Statutes and all the memory experts around at the time, you can have a look at some of my talks online or check out my book, The Mosaic Palace. But for now, we just need to see what that connection is. So in the Shaw Statutes, you have this section. It's a very important section because it's in the second half of the statutes, which is about membership. It's not about building, or the bit about remembering your building work or techniques has been done. This is about joining a lodge. And you learn a lot of things in this section. You learn that there was people who were entered into a book and then were admitted and accepted as Masons. So there's at least 2 degrees running at the time, back in 1599. And we get this idea that you need to memorize things. And here we have it. We have a rule that says that everyone needs to practice the art of memory. And if they don't, they're going to be fined for it. Okay, so there you go. There's a historical precedence for those in charge of lodges, chapters, or other units for fining you for making a mistake in your ritual. Now, that phrase, that specific phrase, the art of memory, is really important. Because if you get all the documents of the day and you look at them and you get that phrase and you see, what do they mean by that? They don't mean simple reminiscence or rote learning. They mean a very special technique, a technique which you've probably heard of as the use of a memory palace. So a memory palace is when you imagine a building in your mind's eye and you practice walking around that building again and again and again on a kind of pilgrimage. And you stop at the same points. You always stop at the same points. And by doing so, you start to make a filing system. So let's imagine it was your house. You'd walk, you'd use all your imagination. Maybe the first point would be in your garden. Maybe it'd be a post box. Place number 1. Walk up to your door, the front door, place number 2. Walk in, place number 3. Maybe that could be your coat hangers or where you put your coats, when you come in. Place number 4, you could probably go even further in for 4 and 5. Maybe you're going to have your couch and your television. Now, after you practice this a lot and you've got the right memory, you really can recall that building easily and walk through it. You can now put objects in there as a means to remember things. And you can use memory images. And memory images have to be silly, shocking, horrific, emotionally stimulating in some way, whether it's funny or surreal. So if you wanted to remember a shopping list, what you'd do is you'd make those objects part of that routine, and you'd make it the most strange but memorable that you can. So if someone told you, I want you to remember, I want you to buy fish, I want you to get milk, I want you to get chicken, I want you to get eggs, that kind of thing. Or and when you get breakfast cereal. To memorize that list, be very easy. You remember our first point, you walk up your post box, fish. You open the post box, check the vote, and out comes loads of fish all over you. You're wet, very easy to remember, very silly. You walk up to your front door. Instead of a doorbell, there's an udder, and there's milk coming out of that. Very silly, very strange, very easy to remember. You go into your front, your porchway, and instead of coats, there's dead chickens hanging on meat hooks. Wow. You walk into your living room, sitting there on the couch is an egg. It's watching television, but the television is all fuzzy, and all you can see on there is the fuzz is made up like cereal. Right, crazy scenes, but easy to recall. When you get to the supermarket, when you get to the store, you think, what do I need to remember? Okay, walk up to my front fish coming out. Very easy. And an expert would be able to make these very complicated and detailed to remember lots of things. So the word in Greek for place is topic. And the reason we say topic of conversation is because this was used for speech making. If you were going to remember someone's life story, you'd put different objects in different positions so you could build up in your memory what you're going to talk about. So that's interesting, isn't it? An imaginary building that you're not there, but you are imagining you're somewhere, where you walk around in the same pathway again and again, always stopping at the same places. You can see why Francis Yates thought Freemasonry must be connected. It mentions the art of memory, and the whole of the ritual is in a memory palace. It was very popular to use biblical places as memory palaces at the time for moral lessons and so on. And of course, the ritual of the Freemasonry do involve walk, stop, always at the same place. If you disagree, just try changing that routine at your next meeting. It's part of the tradition. So this is understandable, the idea that Freemasonry uses an imaginary visit to King Solomon's temple. Remember, at the time of the first Masons, they didn't have beautiful lodge buildings that we have now. It was all in imagination. Later on, it was down in the tavern, and they'd draw a bit on the floor if they could. Incidentally, memory texts at the time say, if you can't paint with your mind, if you can't visualize, then do feel free to put chalk on the floor. But the symbol she found was something more than this. Do you remember I said it was a memory wheel and it was something deeper and more mystical? Well, this is when I need to tell you a few other things just to help you start the investigation. Obviously, there are other elements of Masonic ritual, which are the art of memory, a tracing board or floor cloth where you'd memorize the symbols. It was a common belief since medieval times that whatever you remembered would become you. And this was a belief that everyone had. It was ubiquitous and it had great authority. Albert the Great, Saint Albert the Great, clearly states in his commentary on De Anima that if you fill your mind full of images which are of virtue, they will become part of you in the same way that if you got bitten by a wolf, it does. Somehow memorizing something with great energy puts it into your subconscious. He called it estimative ability. In the same way as a big experience becomes a lesson. His students, St. Thomas Aquinas, phrase it slightly different. Vows of virtue and fidelity slip easily from the mind if not associated with a corporeal similitude. If you're going to take a vow, have a symbol to take that vow on. This practice of moral lessons was associated with a specific art of memory. Just like there's many different styles of music or martial arts or literature, there are many different styles of the art of memory. The three main ones at the time being, the classical art of memory, for speech making and for practical reasons like learning, for being a solicitor or being a politician. The Christian art of memory, how to walk the narrow path and fill your mind for the right images that should appear when you need to make decisions. Using emblems, just like the way I described. In fact, you can find whole Christian books, emblem books, which are just like like those tracing boards. But then there's a third art of memory, an art of memory which Francis Yates thought was somehow visible in our royal arch. The mystical, magical, hermetic art of memory. A secret set of techniques that was said to be able to aid someone in evolving their consciousness, leading them to transform from just a mortal man to a divine being or a god. Now, to understand how this potential was imagined in such memory arts, we must remember that memory meant something different in those days. Memory was anything you could form in your mind. And it had all the associations that we would have now with meditation or visualization or autosuggestion or hypnosis. Before you can see a splendid set of fellows with beautiful bicorn hats, tricorns or other hats, and they're sitting there. The master is memorizing the tracing board, or he's reciting the board. And this is a contemplative exercise. You even see the term meditatio mnemonica used for such kind of memory techniques. It's a meditation whereby you're going to reflect, you're going to receive some kind of enlightenment. Not only are you putting lessons in, it's going to open your mind. So we can understand that just like now, there are some people in meditation practices which believe it's got a lot more potential, and than within Freemasonry and within the practitioners of memory during the 18th century, there were probably people who also believed that there was more potential to their arts. So now we get to start the investigation proper. I've shown you the scene, I've given you the basics, let's move on together. So this is a memory wheel. The practice of memory wheels varies in different ways, but it's like a memory palace. Each one of those letters represents something to memorize. It's normally some form of philosophical principle or some form of underlying concept, or even a form, an energy, a pure presence of mind. In Neoplatonic and Platonic thought, there's the idea that everything is formed of consciousness. And this is very much part of the Hermetic principles that you see expressed, that all things are one thing. The physical around us is just a bit thicker and a bit more solid than what we imagine in our mind. So through contemplation or through practice, you could touch with those original forces. These original forces, which are represented by the elements earth, air, fire, and water, or the 7 planets. Now we're going to go a bit more into memory wheels in a while, but you're probably thinking, like me, when you see this, I can't see anything Masonic in him. Now, I want to be clear, there are many different types of these memory wheels. Some of them only have 2 or 3 letters. Some of them have more than you can see. But once again, nothing occurred to me. I couldn't understand what she'd seen. So I started studying the Hermetic art of memory in detail, and I'm using these 2 diagrams here just for illustration purposes. These are some pictures that can kind of help me explain the 2 steps in the Hermetic art of memory. The one on the left here, this is actually Robert Flood again. This is the temple, the fortress of health. And this is a memory palace that you would imagine, and you would build up in your personality the qualities are associated with the 4 elements: earth, air, fire, and water. These, of course, are associated with the 4 cardinal virtues: temperance, prudence, justice, and fortitude. Before you, you've got Uriel, Gabriel, Raphael, Michael, and in there we've got Homo Sanus, the healthy man praying. And the borderline between prayer and memory starts to get a little bit close here. So the aim here is you are going to use your mind to connect with these underlying forces, and you're going to balance your personality. So the first step of Hermetic memory is called the square art. You are going to become as fiery and ambitious as you can be, airy and intellectual, or watery and intuitional and emotional, or solid, earthy and practical. You're going to be able to do it all. Now, watching this, everyone can relate to someone who gets stuck in one of these. The person who's very aggressive at work and it works very well, maybe they're a stockbroker or NASCAR driver or something, but then when they get home, they can't do anything else. They've just got that aggression. So there's a problem, they try to shout it out with people, that kind of thing. So learning to do this is a big process, and it needs overcoming a lot of things in you. There may be some parts of your consciousness that aren't available to begin with, some strategies you can't do. That could be because you never learned them, or because you've relied on others, but it could also be injuries. You could have, maybe you were bullied when you were young and you shut down some emotions, or maybe you found it was advantageous to not use the mind so much in the circumstances. Maybe you couldn't bond with people who are important around you if you were too clever. Whatever reasons, a bit like if you injured your shoulder, a spasm appears, you can't do some things. On the higher scale, this could be some memories that you've cut out, which are big and traumatic, or just you were given tests too early that you couldn't cope with. You had to come up with an emergency strategy to get past them. And thus you've got to do a bit of work. Only when you've done this square art can you move to the curved. And the curved art is about receiving higher forces, connecting with divinity through prayer. Normally you could sit and look at a planet and let that light shine to you. You could really bond with this through memory. And remember, memory and meditation are very close. You're keeping your mind on things by recalling them. When you're recalling things in detail, so you would memorize a huge number of things about the planets and about the tradition, and you'd be reciting them and going through them. So your mind was just on that planetary energy. It couldn't move from that. So this would be the second step. Well, that immediately occurred to me. That was a bit like pure and ancient masonry. The square would be craft, and the curved would be the Royal Arch. And of course, the cryptic degrees may well have been originally part of that. We certainly know the Mark degree was part of the process of Royal Arch. And there is some phrases in some of the earliest rituals say, you're only allowed to participate in these secrets, having passed through these several chairs. Likewise, you have some very strange hints. You see, I tend to read all sorts of things. What I love to read is the correspondence of memory practitioners or Freemasons. And, so I know, for example, that people at the time saw Bruno's techniques, Giordano Bruno's, we'll meet him soon, as similar to John Dee's in approach. I also know that Desaguliers and another member of the First Grand Lodge was referred to at a party. In the letter afterwards, they said, he is a super excellent master and a most excellent master. So that's interesting. So if we're going to be looking for the use of memory wheels, which would in the Hermetic art be classified as part of that second section, that curved art, where you're going to connect with some higher force or contemplate some really abstract concepts, there are two characters we could look at. Raymond Lull, who is a very devoted Christian mystic, and he wrote whole books on contemplation, and his memory methods were really about finding the divine, and normally by asking questions and taking them through a process whereby each one of those points on the wheel represents a questioning or a concept to compare with. He was probably the person that designed these memory wheels first. Or if we look at more recent influences, Giordano Bruno, his name has come up so often. There are some sections of what appears to be his work actually in the lectures that associate with the 3 degrees commonly practiced in England. And Bruno was more directed towards magic and mysticism and ancient Egypt. And he used his wheels in a less questioning, but more meditative way, whereby you would normally be contemplating a concept that you were going to lead to a sense of oneness with, a sense of contraction, it was called. We can talk about that a little bit later. So what we're looking for is some clues that one of these has influenced Freemasonry, or that the techniques they're using are represented in Masonic ritual. So let's start our investigation by looking at those memory wheels and actually how they work. Many people watching this will be thinking, wow, this is great, because few people actually explain this. Bruno added some techniques for memorizing words or speeches to his books, and most people believe that's the purpose. That was the purpose in putting those in, was so he could say, no, this isn't some mysticism here, really, it's about memorizing speeches. No, the real technique is clearly stated and people tend to pass over it. The memory wheel was probably inspired by the nocturnal. The nocturnal, very similar to the astrolabe, but the nocturnal is a sundial at night. It's a way of telling the time using distant stars. What you do is you find one star in the sky that's easy, normally the pole star, and put it in the middle. And most astrolabes are set so you choose a secondary other star. And then from that, you can find a third bit of information. You can find the time, because the positioning of the 2 stars will show the time. So this nocturnal, you could have it in your pocket, you could take it out and you could tell the time pretty accurately with some adjustment. Raymond Lull had a big inspiration. It was actually an inspiration that came to him after some regret. He'd been thinking some inappropriate thoughts, and an angel came to save him, he felt. And afterwards, he was left with this big inspiration. If you could do this in the outer world, if you could connect with 2 things that you do know, and then find a third that you don't know, could you do it in yourself? So if I said to you, let's you and I contemplate 2 things you know about, and then connect it with a third to make a third, this would be the technique. So if I said to you, right, you know bravery, okay? Yeah, you can hold that in your mind. Keep meditating on that. We'd practice that for a few weeks. Okay, now you know limitlessness. You know, you've seen sea that goes on forever. You've gazed into space that goes on forever. You know limitlessness, don't you? Yes. Okay, contemplate that. You can hold it. Right. Now let's hold those 2 together, and you've got limitless bravery. Put those together. Can you feel it? Can you feel that? Can you feel that? Then you can get the third, something you've never experienced before, could be combined. That's what the memory wheels were designed for by Raymond Lull. But they could also be used for a questioning process. So I'll show you how that works a little bit later. Now, if you got Raymond Lull's books, you'd actually have bits of material, actually have paper that you could pull out and move things around. And there's some pseudo-Lullian ones, which are pseudepigraphal, which actually have Kabbalistic trees that you can rotate the Sephiroth on for your contemplations. But I wanted to let you know that you can have them for mundane things too. So these are volvae, as in revolve. These volvae, they would be used for calendar things. This one shows you the position when there's going to be full moons, the one on the left. The one on the right with the young girl there, she's going to tell you where Easter's going to be any one year if you put the settings right. So this was not a new concept. It was something that had been around for a while. But Raymond Lull turned it into a contemplation. You'd get one of these, you'd have them in your pocket, and you'd be able to use this for your meditation. And this meditation was meant to lead you to higher states of consciousness, upstairs of understanding. There were different levels of understanding in the world, obviously, and you could walk these scales by learning to ask the right questions, by being more logical or more insightful, more intuitive, this kind of thing. This is one of Raymond Lull's diagrams, and I'll explain how you'd use this one. So you're going to climb the ladder of intellect, and this is actually symbolic as well as literal. So around you, there are stones, which don't think, they just do, don't they? They just do. Well, they are how they were first created. You know, people like that too. There are flames, which just move in the direction that a bit of energy they've got pushes them, you know? They don't think or do anything more, they just sort of move. They will move a bit, and you can probably inspire them a bit. Then you've got plants. They're actually moving towards a goal. They can see what's good. They're trying to do something good in the world. They can see the light. You can see how it goes. The beast, the animal, moves towards pleasure. Just moves towards what the nearest pleasure is, you know, not very energetic. The human starts to think, starts to recognize the good, can calculate. Then we get this heavenly consciousness moved by the greater good for all people, all creatures, looking for divine harmony, you can see how this goes. So how are you going to walk this path up here? I'm just going to have to move the video of me is over my memory wheel. We've got the scaled intellect memory wheel in front of you. Let's think of a question you could put to it. These wheels will help you answer any question you want. Let's say, are angels real? So the question right in the middle is, are angels real? So, angel, is it dubitable? Can you doubt that? That's the next thing. Can you see in the wheel where it says that? Dubitable? Yeah, I think I could doubt that. Do you think you could doubt? That's definitely doubtable. But is it imaginable? Can you picture it? Yeah, I could imagine that. Yeah, I can imagine that. Is it sensible? As in, can you sense it physically? Some people might say yes, some people might say no to this one. Is it intelligible? Yes, I can understand it. Can you think it through as a concept? Is there forces doing good? That's definitely believable as a concept. Is it credible? Yeah. That could be believable as a concept, yeah. So it's understandable and believable. Then you can move to the outer ring, and you'd probably join these together. Okay, so an angel, it's an imaginable. Is it, let's look at this on the outside, is it a substance, an actual thing, or is it something which is a quality? At the time they had this concept of accidents, and an accident is something on something. So the movement of water, a wave would be an accident on the water, or there could be a quality to it, maybe a flavor in a drink or something. So is it a thing, or is it a quality of something else? Maybe, God, an angel could be just a act of God. It may not be a separate being. So now you can see how this contemplation starts to happen. Is it a species or is it a genus? Is it the top? Is it the whole thing? Or is it a small part? Well, we know it's definitely a species. There's different types of angels. Is it individual or is it a part of a complex? Is it a part of made up of stuff? So is it one on its own? Can it exist on its own? Could angels? They do say choir of angels. So now you start to see each one of these points is a question you should ask yourself. So that's how those memory wheels were working, a bit like a logical syllogism, questions you should ask to lead you to an understanding. This is one of Raymond Lull's original books. Imagine, this is such tough thing. This is a whole process. There's another page of this that you take one question through. You know that wheel? That wheel was just that for beginners. No, you'd ask one question and you go through this, and these wheels are things like, do you know it? And by know it, they mean understand. Do you like it? And by like it, they mean, would you hope it to be true? And or have a preset belief towards it? Have you got a belief that it could happen, right? And have you seen it? Yeah. So can you intellectually understand it? Can you know it? That's just one of the first ones, and they've got all the possible answers. Now you can imagine why it took me months to get this, because no one explains it in easy terms. No one explains it. Each one of these is like a gate you have to go through in order to be able to answer the question. But still, you see a few triangles and things, but not very Masonic still, is it? Comparing these things. Circles. Let's carry on with our investigation. But we do start to get some clues that this could be the way. There's a very early document which is often seen as a hoax document. The letter from the Grand Mistress is from Ireland, which is probably where the Royal Arch comes from. And it's not the only document that says, speaking of the Kabbalah, as Masonry was called in those days. We get other works by the ancients, you know, Ancients Grand Lodge, which connect Freemasonry with the Kabbalah. But then we have this. Wow. If duly encouraged by subscribers, they'll print a key of Raymond Lullis, without whose help our guardian says it's impossible to come to the quintessence of Freemasonry. So that quintessence, that higher spirit, that pure, it's an alchemical term. So we've got 1727, even if it is something that's put in a bit tongue in cheek. If you read enough things in those ages, you'll find that serious messages are often put in that way. We have got someone else connecting a memory wheel with Freemasonry. Raymond Lull's art, memory wheels, that's the true key to Freemasonry. Wow. So, modern memory expert, a writer from the 18th century, both saying memory wheels, Freemasonry, we've got to solve this. So what we're looking for in our quest starts to move into figure. We're looking for something which is hermetic. So either it's that answering questions or it's kind of a combining things. Raymond Lull's art often used to use the combination of different letters put together to represent different concepts. And you can see some hints of these actually on some documents. Let me take you back a little bit actually so I can show you how this would work. This is an important one. So these wheels here, what you would do is you'd combine the meanings of those letters. So this is a quick recommendation for you. If you'd like to see Bruno's method, which is this wheel here practiced, Francis Yates said it wasn't possible, and so did many other people since. So yes, I needed to do that. It took me months to memorize. Each one of these letters has got a philosophical concept associated with it. And what you do is you combine them in contemplation. So A on the outer wheel represents the the idea that if you sit in the presence of something, it's in its shadow. It uses a quote from the Bible. I won't give you the whole quote, but it's if you sit under the shadow of something, you become like it. If you're in the energy of something, you become like it. A on the second wheel is about Plotinus saying that we have the power to close our eyes and open our eyes. We can take things in or not take things in physically. This is kind of an analogy. So each one of these means something, and you learn to combine them. So you go A, B, A, C, A, D, A, E, A, F. And actually, Bruno's method doesn't use for this method beyond the first two wheels. But just be clear, after months and months of practicing, I could combine that like that for the whole turn the wheel once. It took 7 hours. 7 hours to do this. And if you look at the Unknown Philosophers YouTube channel and podcast, you'll see I performed this in front of an audience. Can you imagine how nerve-wracking that was? Because if you get something wrong, people can look it up. But yes, it is doable. So we're looking for something that either combines two concepts or has a series or puts it through a few questions in Freemasonry using some kind of wheel device. Well, there are some hints that the Royal Arch could be hermetic in other ways. That would be pertaining to the works of Hermes Trismegistus, the ancient Egyptian teachings, as it were. We do see in some of the interesting documents, some from regular Freemasonry, some from some of the rivals there, that Hermes is mentioned, as you can see in this a beautiful certificate from the Rite of 7 Degrees that was extant in London for a while. And we do see a connection between Hermeticism in the Croix manuscript, one of the old charges from Germany, where Hermes Trismegistus does appear. But also the Royal Arch degree originally, and in some jurisdictions still is, was about Enoch. And Enoch was seen as the same figure as Hermes. Hermes Trismegistus went to see the divine mind through big experience. Enoch did the same. It's probably the same person from the point of view of those Renaissance writers and those who came afterwards. So it would fit, but we still can't see that wheel. Well, I started thinking about the arch itself, the curved arch, the sections of the arch. Sometimes you see them divided into the zodiac, and the zodiac is used in some of those wheels. Normally the decans, the 3 divisions of the zodiac with their own memory images, very ancient, very traditional. And as I was looking at it and thinking in these terms, well, the Royal Arch is like a rainbow, the rainbow connection, the rainbow's colours, could that be part of the memory? Something hit me. In the middle of this keystone, mostly used in the mark degree, of course, we've got a wheel with letters on it. I'd seen it so much that it never crossed my mind that anyone would think it was like the memory wheels. What? Could this be what Frances Yates saw that got her interested? Well, of course, we know what those letters are, what they connect, but it woke me up. Where else can we see sets of letters associated with a Royal Arch degree? On the left here, this is a jewel, an American jewel, in fact, which is clearly from a very early period of Masonry. And I'll show you the connection if you want to contact me privately with who owns this, and trying to get more information about this is pretty tough. But it does show they were aware memory wheels in early Masonic practice. But more importantly, the Royal Arch pedestal itself, the actual pedestal that is central to the story, this does have not only writing on it, but Hebrew letters. Now, your Royal Arts chapter may have something different than this. I'm showing you what the standard European Royal Arts chapter would have in it. And as soon as I realized this, I thought, wow, this is it. This is what she saw. This is what got her excited, because why? Raymond Lull uses those Hebrew letters. So does Giordano Bruno. They use Hebrew letters to represent things. So I had a look. And of course, I knew from the Royal Arts lectures that these letters were kind of there as a contemplation device. At the time, they used to like to play with spellings and play with things as a form of meditating, puzzling things out. So that A, the Aleph, the Beth, and the Limel, this A, B, B, this A, B, L, this was meant to spell things in different orders. You know, one way you take in, it says father, the other way it says heart, the other, you know, this is a way of contemplating by spelling things in Hebrew. And the spellings aren't exact, but I knew at the time people would play around with things a bit, and if they sounded similar as well, that was meant to mean that. Now, in the center, you can see written a word that I don't feel comfortable saying for this discussion, but you can also see why I wanted this to be a tiled meeting. This word, of course, is discovered, and very importantly discovered, in the Royal Arts ritual. It's changed in England because of misunderstanding and prejudice. It was replaced with something less mystical and more easy for people from outside of the organisation to accept. But many people, you know, Scotland and Ireland, many people keep the old ways just how they were. So there's a mystery here. If this is a memory wheel, a hermetic memory wheel, this is an exercise. This is a method of learning something. This is a contemplation. You'd be meditating on each one of those letters representing something and then joining them together. Maybe all three of you, one would be representing one thing, one representing, you join them together in your minds, and wow, this is a big thing. And could that tell us something about that name in the center? How exciting. So I started looking around and looking at other people's research, and typical, isn't it? When you start out this, you always look in the opposite direction that you should have. Instead of looking at Masonic research, I was looking at memory things and looking at ancient things and that kind of thing, and looking at alchemy and looking at that. So a lot of things I'm about to tell you were discovered long before I discovered them, and discovered that others had discovered them. But I'm glad that I found the Masonic scholars later on, because some of them, the insights are beyond what I would have ever thought about. So I've included this because this is another example of this. In other jurisdictions, they'll have those three, that A, that B, that L in Hebrew on there. So let's be clear, that's what those Hebrew letters are. I'm not talking about the other ones. Those Hebrew letters are A, B, L, A, B, L. Yeah, or the Hebrew equivalents. If we have a search around, we can find the first kind of Masonic context of this. Now, I can't work out who published this first, because it appears that there's a Lewis Masonic edition and a McCoy edition. Watching this, you probably know McCoy is almost as old as Lewis, or maybe about the same. I don't know. It looks like that we both had a very early beginning, and we've been trading and working together since the very early years. So we did our edition of this book. Now the diagram is on the front, where we've got Elijah in the middle. It's a bit strange. And we've got Jehovah, and we've got Spiritus, and we've got Elohim Fayet. We've got these circles. Then we've got these letters again. But unfortunately, in that book, one of the earliest books on Freemasonry, it's never explained. No one says anything about those Hebrew letters, what they mean. Back to the drawing board. So I started to have a look. what other ancient documents are they in? So I found them initially in this one, the Opus Magio Kabbalisticum et Theosophicum. This is a beautiful work. I love this. It is a pure Kabbalistic work on alchemy, when you're going to transform yourself from base metals into gold in your mind. And this is a diagram of the Philosopher's Stone. And I thought, wow, those are the same letters. And it's about the same time we found it in alchemy. This is a mystical symbol. It's a practice. What do they mean? We're getting there. And we can see in there that the Elijah is here. So obviously someone's made a bit of a error in copying it over to Freemasonry. And I've got to admit at this point, I didn't notice that. I'll tell you later on. There's I owe great thanks to an American scholar who actually noticed that difference. I saw Elijah and I saw everything I thought I was looking for there. You know how if you've got something in your mind, you see it the same way. So let's carry on researching. Let's go a little bit further back. Here we have it. This is Qumran's Amphitheatre of Eternal Wisdom. Even better work. One of my friends just up the road from me, he's got an original copy. And one of my allies, they tipped me off. They said, have a look on the dragon's head. And he actually sent me a modern commentary on it and with a print in there. Oh, I couldn't believe it. The letters matched. And this is a diagram representing the Philosopher's Stone. So these three letters are meant to make up the Philosopher's Stone somehow. If we knew the secrets, if we could meditate on them using some key as each one of these three things represent, that would be it. Around that time, I found someone else had already discovered this. The name won't be a surprise to you, Art de Hoyos. He'd already seen this link, but he'd noticed some things that I hadn't. He'd noticed the Elijah Elohim mistake, but he also noticed that in the original copies, those letters don't quite match. That lamed at the end, that letter L, no, it's not an L in that, it's a nun, an N, a final nun showing it's the end of the sentence. Its spelling of the word Eben, stone in Hebrew. Of course, it's a diagram of the Philosopher's Stone. So, is it a mistake? Is it a difference? Initially, I thought, wow, there's a lot of memory confusion in traditions. Some people say the Royal Arch originally was the Royal Ark because it's about the Ark of Covenant. Some people point out other changes that happen from confusion, but I wasn't convinced. I thought there must be another meaning to this. So I started to look around to see what else is there. You see, at the time, they used to like to experiment with things, with different letter combinations that would mean stuff. So if they replaced a letter, it would show they were thinking about things in that way. A bit like there's some modern circles that you can go to and they'll meditate, and words that sound similar have some resonance connection to them. So they'll say Solomon, Solomon, soul of man, soul of man. They'll connect things. It was the same for in those days. I don't think it was a mistake. I think they were interested in the fact that stone was close to another combination. The Philosopher's Stone and R spelling with the lamed. I don't think it was a mistake. So in my searches, I did find an example where someone had switched a letter for contemplative purposes. maybe Art de Hoyos will be able to tell us what this spelt, what they meant by it. But this is, to me, it looks like a gimel. So they're saying a, b, j here. And they clearly label this as the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Now, this text I found in the Quater Coronati archive with a whole other collection of comparisons, one which I should have noticed before when I was reading Art's work, one that's actually the book I published myself, one which answered my questions for me. The Trinity in Hebrew could be rendered like this. Ab, Ben, Leb. Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. They were clearly labelled in that alchemical text beforehand. We found it. This letter combination, A, B, L, does exist as a contemplation on the Trinity. So I had a quick look. Now, I want to be clear here, full disclosure, if you look in Raymond Lull's works, you can find many different interpretations of the letters. But one of the later ones, and most clearly presented, has the A, the B, and the L as follows. Omnipresence, all teachingness, I think there's an English word for that, or omnipotence, as in all powerful. Doesn't that almost match to the three qualities mentioned for divinity in the Royal Arch ritual? In our Royal Arch ritual, it's omnipresent, omnipotent, and omnipotent, all knowing and all teaching. I think that's close enough. So in that moment, I knew if this was a Lullian wheel, what you'd be doing. Lull would have you almost sing or vibrate the letter in your mind. And you'd meditate on the concept of the Divine Father. You could imagine the brother next to you, the concept of the Son. You could see this going, and you would be trying to contemplate together omnipotence, omnipresence, and omniscience at one. What if you could join those together? You are the third answer for the other two. Wow, we've found a possibility of what the exercise would be if this is correct. And there's a lot that matches up. The Father, Son, the Holy Ghost, and the three qualities in Lull, the use of the different letters. But it's intriguing to think, isn't it, that there could be another mystery solved here. For many years, people have been wondering about this word. You know, there's all sorts of interpretations. Some people like, some people don't. This tripartite word. I wonder if for hundreds of years this has been practiced, a, b, l, a, b, l, if eventually, through Chinese whispers, through things, we stopped saying the letters, but actually they got corrupted. A, b, yeah. You can see how that could happen. Could this be the answer? If so, then we have found the real secret, the exercise we were going to be taught. And it's probable that contemplation took place by replacing letters. A, b, l, a, b, n. Yeah. So you could, the whole idea that the three letters that make the Trinity sounded like and could be transformed into the word for stone, as in philosopher's stone, the stone the builders have rejected. This would be very exciting masonically. And they'd most certainly be doing this as part of their practice if this was the technique taking place. So now, fellow detectives, it's time for our jury. It's time to hear what you think about these discoveries, what you can share, and what your insights are. Before I continue to hand over and we can put our heads together, I'd like to end with a final general recommendation. If you want to explore this, have a look at artwork in the Herodom. Superb writing. Art is such a great scholar and will be remembered as such for many years to go. Let's fully take advantage of having him here while he's there. And also, have a look at this work, Some Royal Arch Terms Explained, where every single word used in the Royal Arch ritual is contemplated and the history explained in detail, and you'll see some more information on this original discovery. Companions, your opinions and questions, please.